I think we simply have a fundamental disagreement here on if this is a catastrophe, if this is an emergency. We have to declare a state of emergency, allow Congress to act, and not even Congress, allow the president to act here in unconstitutional ways to solve this crisis. Okay, that's how you solve the crisis. We don't have a constitution anymore. And I'm not particularly interested in hearing about devotion to the Constitution after that. But I do think there are constitutional ways we could go about doing this if this is something the trial dates won't work. Maybe there's some other kind of constitutional method you could use, an amendment, for example, or something like this. But I don't believe that the Constitution can simply be swept away because of the exigencies of the moment. And it's an argument that was most convincingly made by TR and by Woodrow Wilson, that the Constitution was deficient to meet the crisis of the moment, and therefore, to act in that emergency, we had to act outside of the Constitution. I don't believe that.
Well, thank you for coming back. Like Chris already said, I appreciate it. When I reached out to you, what is it? Man, it's been almost 2 months now, hasn't it? At least over 2 months. And obviously, it was on the day that Charlie Kirk got shot, because I wanted to make sure you were okay. It was literally the first thing I thought about, because obviously there was that happened, and then I didn't know what else may be happening. And when information like that hits online, it's full of wrong things and assumptions and people saying things that aren't necessarily true. And so I thought, well, I'll just go direct to source and ask if you were good, and you were like, yeah. And that had to be really weird for you guys to be professor there. And it's crazy too, because you and I had talked maybe a week prior to that, and you were promoting the event, and I was like, how can I watch this, and because I'm really interested. And you even shared a link, and then something like that happened, which is a tragedy. But I'm curious, what your life there has been like since, but not to be dark, I suppose.
No, it hasn't been dark at all, actually. Well, it was like a week where the whole university was like closed down because FBI was everywhere, and local police and everything. But the students all came back. The next, at least in my class, I didn't notice a significant decrease. There was one student who came and brought her father with her, and he was awesome. So I enjoyed that. I was very impressed at kind of the resilience. People just wanted to get back to life and to learning. And it's interesting because you walk by the quad where Charlie Kirk was assassinated every day. Like you can't avoid it on campus. And we had some candidates in to hire for a new position at the center, and we took each of them to where Charlie Kirk was shot, and you can now walk all around it. And they're in the process of making some kind of monument there. And what I think they should do is I think they should put 2 chairs facing each other so people can sit and have difficult conversations.
I love that, actually.
That's a great idea.
Yeah, isn't that good?
Yeah.
But life is back to normal. I've been impressed by that. That people are. I had actually the biggest absence for me was that I had a bunch of students who actually went to Kirk's funeral in Phoenix.
Oh wow.
Yeah, and drove down.
Yeah, if I was a student there, would feel. I mean, I already felt compelled. It just wasn't something I could do, but I could imagine being a student there and being compelled to go to something like that. Utah's not that far to where you couldn't drive or whatever.
Yeah, and they all said it was a really positive experience, and generally things have. UVU is a spectacular school because it's a working class school. Like, it's an open enrollment, anyone can come. And over like 70% of our students work, and like a good number are working full time. So this is not like a super political school. You don't see protests ever. You don't see anything like that. People just come. They want to go to school. They've got families. They've got jobs. And so it's the last place on earth you'd expect something like this, especially just for like the demographics of Utah Valley. So I thought there was a great response. There was kind of an anti-fragility thing going on. It was great.
Yeah,
not the assassination. The response was very good from the students.
I got what you mean. You actually answered my second question. I was going to ask you if you knew anything specific about what they were going to do monument-wise, and you said that they were building something. It sounds like you're not sure what it is they're making, but
I don't know. My boss is on that committee, but I don't know.
Okay. Well that's good that you guys are doing something, because it is something I had been wondering what was gonna. I saw a mock up of maybe him sitting at a table or something like that, but I think your idea of the two chairs is great because
Hmm.
it's symbolic of him and what he did. Why not? Take it to the chairs kind of thing. Go sit and we'll hash this out, and it would almost be a somber but really, I don't want to say neat, but maybe that's not the right word, so we'll just pretend I found the right word for it, but to take a class and sit two people there and have a conversation, and it would
Hmm.
be really representative of everything that he stood for, which is exactly why when I reached out to you, I was like, we should totally have a conversation, and in the spirit of Charlie Kirk, and debate sort of. I don't see us like going back and forth like like some people did aggressively with Charlie, but I know that we have some differences and ideas on what America is, and some of the policies that have been enacted and a lot of the things that have been going on. And Chris and I have really gone after a lot of these people on we've been calling it the woke right. You can call it the alt right, whatever. The far end of the right wing spectrum lately, especially the Nick Fuenteses, Candace, a lot of these people that have sort of filled that gap. Candace keeps dunking on herself. She dunked on herself again today. She doesn't understand how the internet works, which is kind of crazy for a millennial. But then to see, really, I think the most detrimental person in this space right now is Nick Fuentes. That's just my opinion. And Chris and I have really gone after what he's doing, and we've showed some of his videos, and really pulled out a lot of the old Marxist literature here and pointed out where he aligns with a lot of this collectivist thought, and just trying to let him, give him the rope to hang himself, as it were, and just put on display the nonsensical things that he says. And I found it really funny the other night where he was talking about the nationalists and the socialists coming together, as if it's just like you don't realize, like, the National Socialist Workers Party, like, like, you're trying to say you're not a Nazi, but then you're like advocating for National Socialism. It's just so funny. But you when I asked you about what we should talk about, you're like, we should talk about defining America, and I think that's a really great place. And as the guest, I'd like to hear first, like, what you think it is, because I think that's a question that a lot of people in this country are wrestling with right now. We are a country, and to be a country you have to have an identity, and we're not a country like Germany per se, right, with a couple thousand years almost of history, even if it was Germanic tribes all the way on through the Holy Roman Empire, and the Teutonic Knights and all of that. So we don't have that history. We are born from a concept of taking a multicultural world and funneling it into one thing as the melting pot, but it's not. No one's melting anymore, is the way I see it. But I'd like to, for you,
Mhm.
like, what you would define it as.
Yeah, this is uh I love thinking about this. Actually, we had a lecture on this today. Not a lecture, a debate on this in my class, American
Oh
Heritage
man, you
class at
prepared
UVU.
hardcore.
Not well, not intentionally, but it was in the syllabus.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess how I would think about this is there's really two schools of kind of competing schools of thought here. What makes America? What is America? And there's this common ideals school, and there's a cultural school. And I fall on the common ideals school. And the common ideals school really starts with this idea of what is a nation state, right? So a state is an organization that has a monopoly on the use of force within a certain geographic boundary. And there are many states that have, and historically have been states that had many nations within them, right? The Roman Empire. And then there are nations, and nations are more than just ethnicities. They're a people with a shared history, a blood, a history, lineage, a cultural traditions, and culinary traditions, and all of these kind of things.
Sure.
And it's really the French Revolution that connects these two and says a nation ought to be self-governing, a nation ought to have a state. And this is a really old world idea that there are nations and they ought to be self-governing. And an example of this is in some ways China now. I mean, like, now that they're like 90 something percent Han Chinese, they are a nation with this ancient history that is also governed by a state.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I think this is a completely incorrect model for understanding the United States unless you reconceive the notion of a nation. The nation in the American sense has to mean something new, something uh, uh, modern. And I get from this, there's a statistic I share with my students when introducing this conversation, and that it's since 1820. So this is over 10 years after the end of the slave trade. So I'd like to put that in context. We're not talking about any people brought here against their will, not a single person
Hmm.
that we know of. Of course, there were a couple of enslaved people who were brought
Sure.
illegally. That's a different matter. So
Yeah.
since 1820, 76 million people have voluntarily moved to the United States. That is the largest mass migration in human history.
Hmm.
So to put that in context, across the 19th and 20th centuries, 6 out of every 10 people who moved from one border to another border came to the United States. So when we
Hmm.
say we're an immigrant nation, people don't appreciate what that means. We are literally the immigrant nation in the entire history of the world. We are
Hmm.
unparalleled. The world has never seen anything like this. So when we say we're a nation state, I do believe we're a nation. I do believe there is an American thing that connects us more than just living under a geography controlled by a state.
Hmm.
But we have to reconceive the nation to mean not blood and not religion and not even a culinary tradition, but instead a devotion to a set of ideals, a deeply American set of
Hmm.
ideals, not just a universal principle of natural rights, but the Declaration of Independence and its very American establishment in the Constitution of the United States. These two form the foundation of the American identity. You see this in the rejection of both the Declaration and the Constitution by the Confederacy, especially the Declaration by the Confederacy. It was a non-American entity. Uh, so that is what forms America for me. And from this has followed certain cultural similarities, right? We're a very democratic people, uh, an evolving people. There is something that unites us, but at its core is these common ideals, uh, which raises interesting questions about can you be a communist and be an American, for example? And of course, legally you can, but in some kind of cultural sense, can you really? So that's for me what it means to be an American is to have a devotion to the founding principles and documents of the nation. It's a chosen identity. It's Lincoln's understanding that if you accept the Declaration of Independence, you are, I think this is an exact, I think this might be an exact quote, flesh of the flesh and blood of the blood of the signers of the Declaration of Independence,
Hmm.
which is pretty good. So there we go.
Yeah. I would say that I agree with you that it is a devotion to those principles, that that has to be the uniting factor. There are too many cultural differences to, like you said, rally behind these more traditional ideas of a nation. I just don't think that that too many people are interested in that version of things anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And that's my problem, because you sort of touched on it with your question about can you be a communist and be American? Because I would say ideally, no, you cannot be an American and also be a communist. I say there'd be other examples too. You cannot believe in something like Sharia law and be an American, though you can come here and be a Muslim just the same way you can come here and practice the Buddhist faith or Christianity or Judaism or any of these other things. The problem begins when you put the those ideals that you were describing of a traditional nation state before the principles of America. And then you put maybe your religious principles, to stick with the example of something like Sharia law, before the principles of America. You have the freedom of religion. You do not have the freedom to project your religion onto other people. And I think that while you're right that we are the country, I like that you said it that way, the country of immigrants. I did not know the statistic that you said. That's pretty wild to hear it that way. But that when you move here, you have to, when you take your oath, you have to place this country over the country that you came here from. Like you have to
Mm-hmm.
agree to that. So when you come here and you do things that are wholly un-American, like placing your loyalty above to another country above the United States, I think that is un-American and should forfeit your right to be here. That's what I think. We're getting to extremes here, but I think that this is an extreme time, and I think that there are too many people who have gotten so far down the rabbit hole of what liberal thought is that I shared. The meme is sort of crude, but it's true. It's a picture. I'm just going to describe it the way it is. It's a picture of a white kid around a bunch of other people who are not white, and it says, "At least I have the Constitution," is what it says. And I describe that meme and use it as an example because you can say that we have the Constitution, and you know, you can promote it as these American ideals that you have a devotion to, but if nobody else does, it's just a sheet of paper, just like anything else. And if you don't follow what it says, if you don't uphold the laws within it, then it's meaningless. And we have too many people, I think, in the name of whatever you want to call it, liberalism, kindness, egalitarianism, that basically think that America can be America in the way you described it, but you don't have to stick to those principles at all, and that it's basically just this free for all of any culture can come here, and I have to, like, yes, I respect your culture, but there is a culture here, and that culture is those ideals that you described. And if you want something other than that, then you can, that's the way I feel, then you don't belong here because that's what we think, you know. So that was a lot more crude than the way you described it. You're much more intelligent than me, but you know, I think that while we are a nation of immigrants and the nation of immigrants, we have too many people here who don't believe in that and are here because it's better than where they're from, but they have no interest in contributing to those ideals and upholding them in the way that, I mean, I know I was raised to. It feels like this change has happened really fast. So
Yeah, well, see, yeah, I have a deep concern that I like immigration because I think America's a great place to be, and I want other people to have it as well, the same way my ancestors got to have this opportunity. I'm kind of baffled by the many on the left who really think America is a racist, oligarchic hellhole, and yet like immigration. You should have a sign at the southern border that says, "Turn around, go back. Hell awaits you. Don't come here." So I
right.
don't understand that. But but I think part of the problem that we have, I think that the problem you are describing is more common among natural born Americans who lacked any kind of serious civic education in schools and who are deeply entitled than it
I
is
agree with
among
that.
many immigrant populations. Some of the most patriotic people I've met and the people who really understand what America is are people who fled communist Cuba, right? And who know what this is. Or students. So, for example, last semester, I had a row of students in the back of my class from Venezuela, and they had all immigrated to the United States in the last couple of years. And a student in a couple rows ahead of them who was multi-generational American was just ragging on the United States and what a hellhole it is. And one of the students raised their hand and in pretty broken English said, "You are," in so many words, "you are stupid. You have no
Hmm.
idea what you have here and how great
Yeah.
America is. Because
Yeah.
I know, because socialism
I've
destroyed
seen the
my country."
alternative. Hmm.
Right. And now those are the Americans I want. They get it. They don't really need a civic education. I mean, of course they do, but they've seen it, they've lived it, so they have that education. So there's this crisis of civic education, and actually I think there's some optimism here because there are schools of civic education cropping up all over the country. I work at one of them now, and they're working very hard to increase constitutional literacy in the schools and a general sense of love for country. And last, I know I've got about a million points. Last point.
No, you're good.
Uh, do you ever do you ever hear people say they're like citizens of the world? Like,
Yeah. I've
who
heard
was
that.
it?
Yeah.
The not so guy on the left who went to China recently and was like, "China's so great."
Are you talking
Uh,
about Hassan
Hassan
Piker, like the
Piker.
influencer
that's
dude?
it.
Yeah.
That's it. And he's like, "I have no patriotism for any country, much less the U.S." And I was like, that's
Yeah.
not like something to brag about. I
Hmm.
don't believe that human nature is capable of just loving the world unless you've learned to love a
Agreed.
particular and a community. And so
Hmm.
patriotism gives you the capacity to love your community and your neighbor, and only
Hmm.
from that can you love what is extended from it.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think he's paid to say a lot of the things that he says, especially by the CCP. But I want to address your point about immigrants, because I do agree with you, and I'll give you a totally anecdotal example. There's a guy that I work with who is an Iranian immigrant, and he is the only person in the office the day that Charlie Kirk got assassinated who I could tell was visibly upset. And I asked him about it. I never talked to this guy before because he was walking around like watching the news about it in the office, like with the audio on. I was like, that's kind of nuts. Like this, totally not office protocol, right? And so I asked him if he was okay, and we just sort of had this sort of conversation, and he was saying how much he really liked like Charlie Kirk's videos and what he did, and he can't believe this happened, right? And so it's sort of how we became friends. But the other day we had a whole conversation about the founding fathers, and he knew way more than the people I work with who are Americans. And these are people that have been here for a while. So I do agree with you that people who move here from other countries have an appreciation because they've seen what the alternative looks like. And this is a point that Chris and I make all the time too, that Americans take for granted what we have here. And earlier, the first time you were talking, one of the thoughts that came to my mind was, I hate how everybody focuses on the negatives of this country in our history. We have had negatives, and we've come through the other side every single time better, right, than we have been before. And the reason why there are so many issues isn't because the ideals of America are bad. It's because we are literally a group of people who have so many different confluences of cultures and ideas and trains of thought trying to come together in one thing. Like if there was ever an example of humanity trying its best to be great, America is it. And yes, we had chattel slavery. We had a whole war about it where thousands and millions of people died, right? Like I'm not sure the exact number.
700,000.
Thank you. 700,000 people died for that, right? We've gone through 2 global conflicts. Like we have these issues as Americans, but people focus, this is just, I think it's human nature anyway to focus on the negatives, but there's so much more positive, I feel like, to point at as an American people, separate of the things our government has done. But as an American people, I think there's so much more positive. So, but where I think I divest from that is I think that, yeah, there are a bunch of people who come here and they are naturalized here. And I know some of them, I work with some of them. A good friend of mine, his wife is a naturalized citizen from Japan. She's awesome. And the things I see here in California among the Americans who don't care that they live in America are a lot of people who frankly view this as a place to come and get what they can out of it, and then don't care about the infrastructure we have. They don't care about American history. You don't come here and then form an entire community to keep America out if you love being here. And I see that so much, especially here in California. I see it around me all the time. And I think that we enable that as a country now. And it's a sad thing to see, but I agree with you. I think it's all of these things that happen. Americans who have no concept of anything but America, and so they feel entitled and have no civic education. I think what you said there is completely correct. And I think that there's a bunch of people who do immigrate here who appreciate it. But I think that with everything that's happened over the past 5 years now, there are so many people in here who don't care. And I think that they see other Americans who don't care and they follow that example, to be honest with you. I think that that's a situation too.
It's kind of the fly in the ointment though, isn't it? Right? Because I would agree with both of you that some of the most patriotic people that I've worked with, especially in the military, were using military service in order to gain their citizenship. And some of the most patriotic people that I've ever fought with were Filipino Americans, first generation. They absolutely, they love it. A lot of them serve to do that. But I think it's because of how immigration has been mishandled and subverted is the situation that we're in now. Because if it would have been maintained, right, if proper borders would have been maintained and if law and order would have been maintained and we were only talking about just pure immigration at this point, I don't think we would really even have an argument. But because it's been subverted through open borders policies and with mass illegal migration, which I had to have that conversation with my son of trying to get him to understand, hey, we're defining terms here. When I say immigrant, that's somebody who went through a legal process to move countries. But when I say migrant, right, like we're talking about somebody that's subverting the law and trying to enter a country illegally, so that way he didn't start falling into these false dichotomies, right? But because of the way that immigration policies have been subverted and open borders, like I was saying, I think that's why we're having the conversation that we are now, because the people that are crossing the border illegally, they're already not going through the legal process, unlike the golden age that you were talking about from 1820, through industrialization during the early 1900s, right? Ellis Island and all that. Like, a lot of those immigrants came here to be part of the system, to contribute. They came to be American, right? Whereas like now, like you were saying, Brandon, we have people that are just coming here to extract from the system. They don't want to assimilate. They don't even want to go through the immigration process. Mm-hmm. They just want to be here for free Americana. You know what I mean?
Can I complicate this picture just a little bit?
I hope you would.
Please.
I think
educate us.
This idea of the golden age versus the open borders age is not quite an accurate view of American immigration history. Before 1875, we had very few immigration laws. It was in many ways open borders. Right, when Thomas Paine immigrates to the United States in 1774 or 1775, he literally just gets off a boat, swears an oath of allegiance to Pennsylvania, and boom, you're an American. Though of course that didn't exist yet. Boom, you're a Pennsylvanian. That was it. That was it. And for him, America was a second chance. It was a chance to come and get ahead economically. Think about waves of immigration that are coming in the end of the 19th century. A lot of these people are coming not necessarily because of any kind of American ideals, but because they're starving at home and they don't want to starve, and America offers an opportunity not to starve. So open borders is not necessarily unusual in our history. What I do think is different is a sort of multiculturalism gone to hell, which is that there is no superior and inferior. And I don't mean by culture, I mean that there's nothing wrong and right, that the laws of a country should not supersede cultural customs, that there's nothing uniquely good about the American system. So, for example, if you have a bunch of immigrants coming from, let's say, Afghanistan, where they have very different views on the role of women and legal rights of women, these immigrants need to know, and many of them do, that we have laws against beating your wife here. It's actually illegal. I don't care what your religious laws are. It's illegal here. You can't do it. You actually have to allow your daughter to go to school. You're going to have to be okay with seeing women in public places, because it's not only our law, but we think it's the superior law. It's a better law and culture than the one you had. And you can come here and you can keep your food and you can worship in your mosques, and you have every right to do that. But you cannot bring those cultural things which conflict with our cultural things, because there's a supremacy clause here, culturally speaking, and ours is supreme when it comes to legal differences here. That, I think, has been lost. And I think that's more significant than the open borders change, which is really very common in our history.
That's what you just described way better than I was trying to earlier, about that's it right there. That's the problem, is that people are so afraid to say that, yes, this culture and the idea that we have here is better than wherever you're coming from, right? Like, when I tell people that when I was in Africa, there was a woman who was teaching kids about contraception and had her arms cut off in front of them, people are like, that's crazy. I'm like, yeah, but that's normal, right? Like, it's not normal, but that happens in the Horn of Africa because of the religious extremists in that area. So yes, I am going to say my culture is better than yours if that is your culture, right? And that is the problem. I think that our politicians have understood that they can hold you emotionally hostage by guilt tripping you into thinking that it's wrong that our culture, like you just described, is superior to some of these ideas, that you don't speak up, you self-censor. And then I say this a lot too, though some of the problems we have in the United States, there are laws already against them. We just don't uphold those laws. And it, to give you an example, Ilhan Omar saying that her allegiance is to Somalia, right then and there, she should have no place in governance at all. And she just violated the oath she took when she became a citizen in this country. She should be gone. That's black and white. It should not be controversial to say that. And that should go for her and anybody else that behaves that way. And if we just set aside this pearl clutching about our culture and these things that you pointed out earlier, this dichotomy in, well, hey, America sucks, but it's totally okay that you want to come here for a better life. Well, that makes no sense. Like you said, you should be standing on the border with the sign saying, don't come here. It's hell here, right? Stop being ashamed to say those things that, hey, we do have a culture here. That whatever you're doing is not okay. It does not jive with anything, right? Like there should be nothing that says there is nothing that says it's okay to have a no-go zone in a neighborhood, in a city in the United States, because actually secretly there's a secret government here that abides by Sharia law and we enforce it behind closed doors, right? There should be. I don't think something like Epic City, East Plano, Islamic Center in Texas should be a thing. Like there should not be. What you're creating essentially is another country almost inside the United States, because to speak about Islam specifically, like Islam is, like, this is by definition submission to God. That's what it means. And the all-pervasive orthodoxy of that religion is not just that you will worship, but that you will abide by these laws, and that in the same way that a government and a state, like you said, that holds all that authority and force, will enact those things on you, or you will comply or you will die. That is a completely and totally different government here in the United States that should not exist, right? So just that's an example. But I think hit at the exact problem, is that we have to recognize, and we're not even recognize, but say out loud that we do have a culture here, and that culture is these principles, and that's it. And if you don't want to live here and abide by those principles, it shouldn't be controversial to say, then go somewhere else. I don't have to hate you. I don't have to think that you're a terrible person. I don't have to spit at your feet or anything like that for me to say something like that because you don't want to assimilate here, right? Like that should just be the least controversial thing ever. When I was in Germany, and I was stationed there, I made it a point to learn as much German as I could. I made it a point that the Germans that I work with to try the food that they brought to work, even though I don't like horse meat, and it's a common thing in that part of Germany, right? Like all of these things, like I made it a point because I respect the fact that there's a culture there. And so many people, especially, and I blame my generation, right? Millennials for this. Like white people have no culture, or America has no culture. It's like, yes, absolutely we do. And you know why? Because we're speaking English right now, first off, right? Like that's culture. But it's become a shameful thing to say America has a culture, and it's all of these great people. Teddy Roosevelt's dissertation at Harvard was on equal rights for women, right? Like this person, like in history, who was about, nationalism, but also conservation, who did say things that today you would say are racist, but at the same time was advocating in his early 20s for equal rights for women, so like there has always and will always be a blend of things like that here in the United States. It's just who we are, and that's okay. America isn't something that's finished. It is a set of goals and ideals that we're always moving towards, and pretending like they don't exist isn't progressives, it's regressive, completely and totally. That's, rant over, I guess,
No, I completely agree. I don't care what food you eat. I don't care how you dress or anything like this. But I do care that you're attached to the Declaration of Independence and the idea of natural rights, which is something we have been working out, often at odds with the democratic model, because democracies very rarely can very rarely make 100% good decisions, right? Usually, actually, they make decisions that harm minorities and their natural rights. But nevertheless, we've had a fairly good trajectory in where we've gotten
We're the
in our
oldest
attachment.
constitutional republic in the world, aren't we? Like the
Yeah,
average
we are.
survivability of a we would be a young country, right? But like the average survivability of a republic is only a couple of decades if you look at the average around the world. You know, we're going on
Yeah,
250 years next year.
it's a pretty good document. Quick,
Hmm. You're right.
quick, maybe optimistic story.
Okay.
I am optimistic that you can assimilate uh, very politically involved and serious religions. And the most important example of this is the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. It's the Mormons. Us.
You.
We were the problem children for a long time, right?
You're
We
right.
literally fled the nation
Hmm.
to Mexico. And then, of course, Utah becomes the U.S., and that's a whoops. It didn't work out fleeing the country, but we
Right.
literally tried to free the country to create basically a separate kingdom, right?
Hmm.
Which really merged church and state, total violation of the liberal democratic procedure. But
Hmm.
why did they do that? Well, because they had their own laws and new cultural norms that were illegal in the United States, polygamy being central to them, but also the meshing of church and state, among other things.
Hmm.
But now look at the state of Utah. Now look at the LDS Church, which is hyper devoted to the U.S. Constitution and has assimilated deeply, overrepresented in the military and the CIA and the
Oh
FBI,
yeah.
Congress, both the House and the Senate, and in local government. So
Chris and
A
I make
clearly,
that
lot of
joke all the
Mormon
it
and Green
time.
Berets.
Yes.
right.
Dude, the most patriotic dude I ever served with in the Air Force, what's up, Zach, my former co-host, is Mormon.
Right. So
Yeah.
there's something to be said that there is, this country has a remarkable capacity to assimilate. It didn't take that long, right? The big turn, of course, Utah becomes a state in 1896. So there's only really 40 years in the political wilderness there.
Mm.
But by the time you get to the post-war era, the renewed cultural focus is on assimilating to American culture as much as possible. So
Hmm.
I think there's a bright future. Uh, I think in 200 years, you could have an absolutely flourishing and integral Muslim American community that is as devoted to the U.S. Constitution as Mormons are, or the Jews are, or anyone else. So I don't think it's necessarily the religion that's the problem. It's these uncomfortable relationships of what is our duty to God versus our duty to country kind of a thing. They'll figure it out.
I think I sort of make that argument. I can't say I 100% agree with that, but that like there is a version of Christianity out there that is also extreme in that regard, and that Christianity had its extreme moments throughout history, and Christianity has on paper, right, has about a 700-year roughly head start on Islam, and I don't know. I'm not saying that there's science behind this, but maybe they're going through their extremism phase. But I mean, I've seen it, in places, and I see it. It just, if you want to put God over a country, like that's fine, but like in public and here, like you better put country, like this is America, like it's not anything else, and that would go for any other religion, not just Muslims, but I just give that example because of some of the problems that we have here, and what I know Islam to be, right, like there's not, like, Catholics have the Pope, but that's not the same thing, there's
Oh,
not
but
a
people said
specific.
it was the same thing for a very long time, right? The
They
core
did,
of the
but
Know Nothing Party, people said it was the same thing.
sure, but those that think that's not, I don't think that's a total comparison, because there are the fallibility of the Pope, and the fear of somebody voting because of what the Pope says. Like, I can give you examples of Muslims behaving in a way that is exactly what people were afraid of that didn't happen, right? With Catholics, like, it was such a shock that Kennedy was the first Catholic president, and then they shot him, I guess, but not because he was Catholic. But I just was that's maybe making a joke too soon. But no, I actually wanted to ask you about your thoughts on ICE and the Department of Homeland Security going and into cities. You can give me your thoughts on the peacekeeping, as it were, that's going on, but literally grabbing people and taking them off the streets, or taking them out of courthouses and getting rid of court. Yeah, did I say that right? Yeah, taking them out of courtrooms, or and getting them out of the country. What do you think about that?
Oh, I don't like this at all. The Constitution is very clear. All persons in the 14th Amendment, right? All persons have a right uh, to due process, to equal protection of the laws, to the privileges and immunities, right, right, right. So, uh, really, equal protection of the laws, due process. Every person who steps in this country, illegal immigrant, legal immigrant, refugee, fifth generation American, has a right to due process. And this is really important because you're what you're doing when you're grabbing someone off the street with the authority of the government is you are saying my force is superior to your natural rights to to prove that you are guilty of something. And you just look at them and the color of their skin and say, oh, this person must be an immigrant from Mexico, and you drag them into a plane and deport them to El Salvador is as great a breach of the constitutional order as I can imagine. You have to prove that every single person you deport is in fact in this country illegally. That's called due process. I don't care if it's difficult. I don't care if it would take a long time. If you're willing to cut corners for the Mexican immigrant in Chicago, you will cut corners for the fifth generation American in New Hampshire. There cannot be a breakdown on this. I mean, this is a hill I'll die on. Just
Yeah. So to that, I would say that the last 4 years were an extreme situation, and I get the whole like kind of really at its root, you're like kind of like making the slippery slope argument, which is what we make all the time. That if you start giving ground on something, just like anything else, more ground will be taken. Give an inch, take a mile, kind of thing. That if you just because you got declared, there's two things here, and I'll have to probably do a good job of coming back to them. But that if you came here and you didn't care to abide by the due process that we have established for you to come into this country legally, and you are taken out of here without your due process, right? That to me, like I really have no sympathy about it, because in your first act in coming into this country, you have said that you do not care about the laws and you do not care about the process that's set up before you to come into this country. And we can have a conversation about like reforming actual immigration. I do think that needs to change. Like what the process is for naturalization, I think is insane, or very convoluted. But the other thing with it is, to me is that there are so many people that came across the border to really pretend, I guess, like it's normal, and that this isn't an extreme situation. It's not like we have that didn't happen. It's not like the last 4 years didn't happen and that was going on. And I think it was a much more tenable situation to take somebody and put them through this process. And I also don't think people are being rounded up by the color of their skin. If that's happening, like we're talking about a small percentage of who is being taken off the street. And there's, as somebody who's done law enforcement, right? Like, you're going to have mistakes, and those mistakes should be rectified. That's not an excuse. Like, that deserves to be treated the way it needs to be treated. But I'm trying to there's so many different gray areas here that I'm trying my best to tiptoe the line through them. That this is an extreme situation. There are plenty of examples of countries and extreme situations doing things to correct a problem. Sorry, my camera's being weird. To correct a problem that, and I also know that these guys that there is a process to find who these people are, and they know that they are here. Like, to me, that President Biden said, "Oh, well, you're lawfully present in this country," is like a blanket statement for a group of people. Like, to me, that's not good enough. And I think that this isn't 100 years ago. We have a lot more problems economically than we can sustain with the amount of people that came across the border and live here and pull resources away, from people who are already citizens. And, now we're kind of getting into where I say, like, this is where I will say Americans first, right? Like there should, if we're more worried about people who just crossed a line on the ground, which is the way it was treated for the past 4 years and came here, but there are Americans who are suffering. You have people who still are waiting for FEMA to pay them out for natural disasters. There are veterans who are homeless. All these other things that could be being worked on. Like that is at the very bottom of a totem pole of problems here for me to care about, because they're not rounding up Americans. They're going after people that came. They're trying to correct a problem as quickly as the problem arrived, I guess, is the kind of what I'm trying to say. And I see you trying to, yeah, go ahead.
You made a really great point at the beginning of this podcast, which was that the Constitution is just a parchment barrier unless you enforce it. If you really care about this document, you cannot abide any person being denied due process and deported. So where in this document does it say that you can completely eliminate due process based on the mere suspicion that someone has broken the law and entered this country illegally?
I don't think that it is just mere suspicion, though.
No. You haven't proven anything. The only way you can prove anything, according to the Constitution, is by bringing them before a jury of their peers. That is the only way you can be actually convicted of something. Everything else is just suspicion, and government can't touch you for suspicion. There's only one case in which you can even suspend habeas corpus, and it's suspension, not eradication, and that is a congressional power. The privilege of the writ of habeas corpus shall not be suspended unless when in cases of rebellion or invasion the public safety may require it. Congress may declare the temporary suspension of habeas corpus. That they have not done that, nor has President Trump pulled a Lincoln and said, actually, I can do it on my own. So in that case, the 14th Amendment holds here. No state shall make or enforce any law which shall abridge the privileges or immunities of citizens of any state of the United States, nor shall any state deprive any person of life, liberty, or property without due process of law, which nationalizes the Bill of Rights, meaning not only can the national government not deprive you of life, liberty, or property without due process of law, neither can a state. If this is just a parchment barrier, then get rid of it. But this is the most fundamental trial right that you have. You are not guilty of anything. Government cannot use force against you unless they have proven it in a court of law. I don't care if it's inconvenient. I don't care if you hated all the immigration laws that came before this. You have to prove that every single person is here illegally, or you have broken the U.S. Constitution.
Don't you think that doing something like that is, I mean, we were talking before about like having a country, right? And the idea that this feels almost like putting some laws over the top of other laws, that the border doesn't matter. We were gaslit for 4 years about the border being a problem, right? And all the number of people that came across the border there, that it can't be a country if you pretend like the border doesn't exist and you let any old Tom, Dick, or Harry come across the border and then exist here in this country. And just because they broke the law by coming into this country, they just walked across this arbitrary line in the ground, which it is not, right? That they came in to this country and they exist here. To me, that the fact that somebody can just do that and they exist in this country and now they have the same rights as you as a citizen, I don't think that that is fair. I think that we are getting to the point where what it means to be an American and what a citizen should mean has been so watered down to just mean that you exist here and you crossed an arbitrary line. Like, to me, that's not good enough. Like, we are not, this isn't 1776 or 1787 anymore. Like, we are 100% and have been for 80 years the country that maintains and has maintained primacy and global security around the world. And to pretend like that shouldn't matter because a bunch of people from South and Central America crossed over the line into this country and now deserve everything that for generations Americans have earned and have done and have lived through, right? That's not fair at all. And I get the point you're trying to make, and this is where that even it's uncomfortable for me to have this conversation, because I agree with you. It like the Constitution has to mean something. But then so do the borders. Then so does everything that every American has done over the past 250 years has to matter. Then so does the fact that when you come here, you have to abide by the, like, it just, to me, it just sounds like breaking the law and then begging for forgiveness later and getting everything that, like, getting your cake and eating it too. Like, if you know, because they registered all these people, right, with that stupid app they created, which was nonsense. It gave you a court date 5 years down the road that you were never going to appear for. You came, whatever checkpoint you came through, they wrote down your name and gave you the same phone number they gave 800 other people that goes to nowhere. And they just know who you are because of this, and they're getting rid of you because you're lawfully here and you're on a list because of what happened in the last 4 years. Oh well, that's how I feel. Like this, it has to mean something. If we sit here and water everything down, this is like the difference between dying on principle versus acknowledging the sentiment of what America is. Like I'm not going, like I said before, oh well, we have the Constitution still, but there's whatever the number is, because no one can agree on the number of millions of people that came across the border over the last 4 years. Like, oh well, they're just here now, and we're going to spend all this. Like, what's easier, to take all these people and give them all a court date and try them for, however long that takes, because district court judges have all this power that they shouldn't have, right? And they put all these barriers in the way, and they pretend like they're, I'm going to get off on a rabbit hole that doesn't make any sense here, but that idea of giving everybody a day in court, like that number of people, that just is, how long is that going to take? What sort of country are we going to have at the end of the day there? Like, it just, that seems like
a constitutional one.
I get, oh, like, okay, we have a constitutional one with a bunch of people that now we just let millions of people come across the border and put a strain on the economy, put a strain on everything else that everybody has. And then that we're just saying, okay, that's cool. They just exist here now. Like, I don't think that's fair to everybody that has lived here generationally or has naturalized themselves here. Like, that just, because President Biden and his administration didn't give a shit and just did this for 4 years, that's not good enough for me. I'm sorry. Like, that's just not.
Right, but we're kind of mixing a couple things here. So
Sure.
First, when I said that what I thought made you an American or made America was this,
Sure.
I actually meant it. It's this. This is what makes you an American. What is supreme, right? You're saying which is more important, the border or the Constitution? Well, the Constitution, because it's the Constitution that gives Congress the power to establish the border. Now, you can blame Biden for all sorts of things, dereliction of duty, failure to execute the laws according to his constitutional oath of office. Sure, you can lay that at his feet, and I don't know. I guess we've now set a precedent that you can impeach presidents and prevent them from ever holding a position of trust in the United States again, even if they're out of office. So do that for Biden if you want to. That's fine. Hold a trial for every single person, and every single person who's guilty, fine. Deport them according to the law until you've rewritten the laws, but you have to give them the trial first. I'm not saying you do the trial and then you say, okay, you can stay. I'm saying hold the trials according to the law of the land. If you're found to be here illegally, then you leave. Then you can be deported, but not before then, because otherwise you don't know if they're here illegally. And in the meantime, reform immigration laws. So be mad at Biden, sure. Be mad at our failure to implement the Immigration Reform and Control Act all the way back from 1986, sure. But don't use that as a pretense to completely get rid of the one thing we've agreed makes us an American. This is, what a silly argument. And also, well, actually, no, I'll stop there, and then we can keep going.
I was just going to say that there is historical precedents for suspending laws for extreme reasons, right? Like the idea.
Nothing in the Constitution. No. There's nothing constitutional. The only thing you can suspend is habeas corpus in those three situations, and only when Congress declares it. There is no historical precedent for suspending this document. Not a single one.
Okay. That needs then something. I'm not trying to say, I'm not making an argument for wiping your nose with the Constitution. That's not what I'm trying to do. What I am saying is that it literally prevents us from solving a problem. Like it is not tenable to take hundreds of millions of people and give them a day in court. There's just no freaking way that is possible. Like, it's going to be 50 years from now before something like that happens. And maybe more, right? With how slow everything happens here in this country. Then something congressionally needs to happen to get them out of this country. That's what needs to happen. And I think that I think that President Trump recognizes that this problem happened really fast. It's a serious problem, right? This is like getting shot on the battlefield and being like, I'm going to throw a Band-Aid on this and then pretend it doesn't exist. You know, like what we're talking about here. Like this is, you have to do something, right? Like you have, whatever it looks like, Congress doing something about it and saying, get the fuck out of here. We're just going to call this period of time whatever you want to call it, an emergency or a disaster or whatever, or whatever it was, and do something about it, because that is not a tenable solution to give everybody a day in court. There's just no freaking way. You're gonna tell me like tens of millions of people are going to get and pull Americans out of jobs to go sit on a jury and then gunk up the work. So now we're just gunking up everything else to drag these people through due process to get them out of here when they've already gunked up everything else, because there was such an influx of people that really no other country would put up with, right? No people should. Like this is like this. It's like we have put up a roadblock because nobody foresaw the fact that this number of people could come across a border in such a quick amount of time, right? Like, and something like this would happen. And like, I don't want to get rid of the Constitution. That's not the point I'm making. But I am also saying the solution that I guess exists in the parameters of it right now, like what you're describing, like giving everybody a day in court, that's insanity. Like, just because if a law is a law, but it's insane to uphold, like what is the point of having that law, right? Like that, I'm sorry, like that's not what we're asking for. I'm not asking for this. Like if you're here lawfully present here in the United States, like Congress can do whatever they need to do to expedite the situation for you and get you out of here. And if you're lawfully present, whatever you want to say, you can come back. If you go through the immigration process, fine. But everybody else that's already here, that has a family and has been here generationally, like it's not fair to those people to say, well, yep, this thing that exists here is preventing this problem from being solved. That's not logical at all. Like there has to be a solution, and just saying the Constitution says they can be here. Like, okay, cool. Well, the Constitution says they can be here. It's nonsensical to have tens of millions of people over the past 4 years come into this country. No country could survive something like that over the long term by just saying, oh well, right, and throw your hands up because this says this, right? Like we are a people with a culture. And we are a people that have an economy. We are a people that have given generations worth of our time, blood, sweat, and tears to be here. And the fact that somebody let that happen a group of people let that happen over the last 4 years, like that is an extreme situation that requires our government to act to make it easier for us to solve that problem, instead of just saying everybody gets a day in court. Like that, to me, that's just an insane solution. That's just my opinion.
I didn't say the Constitution says that you can be here. The Constitution says that you cannot be deprived of life, liberty, and property without due process. That's what I said.
If I put words in your mouth, it wasn't intentional.
No. I think I think we simply have a fundamental disagreement here on if this is a catastrophe, if this is an emergency. We have to declare a state of emergency, allow Congress to act, and not even Congress, allow the president to act here in unconstitutional ways to solve this crisis. Okay, that's how you solve the crisis. We don't have a constitution anymore. And I'm not particularly interested in hearing about devotion to the Constitution after that. But I do think there are constitutional ways we could go about doing this if this is something you're the trial dates won't work. There's some other kind of constitutional method you could use, an amendment, for example, or something like this. But I don't believe that the Constitution can simply be swept away because of the exigencies of the moment. And it's an argument that was most convincingly made by TR and by Woodrow Wilson, that the Constitution was deficient to meet the crisis of the moment. And therefore, to act in that emergency, we had to act outside of the Constitution. I don't believe that. So
then make an amendment.
Sure. Make an amendment. I don't know what that amendment would say, nor do I think I would vote for it, but make an amendment because at least you're preserving the structure of the thing that you love so much,
I
right?
guess I would ask you
And
what you would say to people then, that it just to tell them you have to live in this mess that somebody else created for you.
I would say democracy sucks. Sorry, they voted this guy in and then they allowed him to do it, right? If you don't want a president to fail to execute the laws, then have a Congress that's willing to stand up to the president and impeach the guy,
I
right?
mean, I agree
Then
that's what should happen. It's not what happened, right? And
because that's not what Americans were willing to do. And then they did. In 2024, they elected in a president who was much stricter on immigration law, and they expected him to do things that were simply out of his presidential power to do, which is a good thing. So I guess what I would say to them is, I'm sorry that democracy is so unfun so much of the time, and can really mess stuff up. And but there's a potential other solution here. You're not going to like this, but there is potentially another solution here if you don't want to set court dates for every single person because it could take a really long time. I agree. Though we've done remarkable things as a country before, I think we could mobilize to do something like this. Uh, well then, do what Congress did, Johnson did. Ugh, I hate to say that. What Johnson did after the Civil War, or what Congress did in 1986 and grant a general amnesty, wipe the slate clean and start over.
yeah,
Now I know you're going to hate that solution, but it's just
I think
another
you might be
option.
muted,
Chris,
Chris.
sorry, you talk.
I think you might be muted.
Hi. How about now? All right.
Yeah, I can
Anyway,
hear you now.
okay. No, I was just going to say that I think that you guys have made the same point on two sides of this issue, and that's that the Constitution is already not being followed to a certain extent, and that's one of the things that got us here. And I really appreciate your stance as being a constitutional purist, and I would align myself with you on that. I don't really think that anybody's arguing for denying anybody due process and scooping up people based on their skin color, just being like, hey, you look like an illegal, like, get out of here. I don't think anybody's arguing for that. But the process is already not being followed. The law is already being manipulated in order to allow this problem to persist, right? And the laws manipulated and the courts are manipulated in all different types of ways. Like I would point to the FISA courts as a great example of this, right? Like there is no jury of peers when they put a FISA warrant before a judge, but they can sign off on American citizens being, essentially spied upon, which is a violation of your constitutional rights. They're not supposed to be allowed to do that. But in the same way that the FISA courts work, right? It's like you don't need and Brandon, jump in and correct me if I'm wrong on this, but like opening investigations, right, and determining who is here illegally, who has outstayed their court dates, right? Like you said, they put a lot of these people on the app, and they know, like, we know who they are. If we can find terrorists in the caves of Afghanistan, right? Like we can determine who is here illegally and who needs to go sit before a judge and have their due process done out, right? Or seen out. But like we definitely can figure out a way to solve this problem, to do it by the Constitution, if we had lawmakers, if we had executives that were willing to do what they actually have within their constitutionally given powers to solve the problem. I don't think that we have enough people with like the political will to see that carried out. You're never going to have a Congress that's going to vote for things like this because they're looking at each other, and the dirty secret is they all go, well, we know how many illegals are within our districts. Like I would never get to be next season's hot new social media influencer if I voted for a bill like that, right? And so it's like we can't count on Congress to act. I think the president's doing a good job within his executive powers in order to solve this problem. But in the same way that he's working well, it was Biden mishandling his executive powers and failing to uphold the border, which caused a huge part of this problem in the first place. And I know that was kind of rambly, and I went around Robin Hood's barn without making a definitive point, but I'll turn it back over to you.
I think it was well said, actually, for what it's worth.
Oh, I appreciate that.
To like the conversation we were having before, if you think that like if you think that you could give and expedite people having a court date, I don't know what that would look like. I don't know if you could hold mass court at a time, like you got 100 people sitting in the pews and in a courtroom, and they all get 30 seconds in front of a judge. And you know what I mean? Like, I don't know I don't know enough about that process to say this is a solution with that. Like, I don't know what that means, or what that would look like. I don't know that. I know that the bigger problem here is that we have a government that's insufficient to find a solution because they can't agree with one another. They're not working towards finding a solution to work with one another. Congress sucks, right? Like, the reason why the executive has so much power is because Congress isn't doing their job. Like, that's
Preach.
what happens. And I am not saying that I think the Constitution should be suspended. I think that is to what your point before about democracy sucks, like that the inclusion of just because somebody is here that they now get all the same rights as what a citizen has, right? First off, that feels like a dichotomy that deserves to be resolved, right? Look, you want to say something?
But they don't have all the rights the citizens have, but they do have the right to life, liberty, and property under the constraints of due process. They're not guaranteed privileges and immunities of citizenship. It's just that they cannot be deprived of life, liberty, and property without due process. That's really the only right that applies. But there's no voting rights that we're talking about here, or any other kind of citizenship-based rights.
I know they don't have voting rights and other things. I was talking about in a cruder way, like the point you just made about life, liberty, and property and due process. That if there was a solution, and I don't know it, that whatever it was, you said an amendment, right? Something, I don't know what that would look like either. Maybe that amendment creates a fast lane in the judicial system for this problem to get solved, and maybe, I don't know the requirements of an amendment and its lifespan. I know that they can be repealed, I don't know if you can put a sunset date on it for something and say, yeah. So, and say like, oh, well, okay, let's just, to use round numbers here, by 2033, everybody, all these people will have gone through this fast lane and gotten rid of them, then fine. Like, I understand on principle and agree with you, like on the fact that, because I make that argument all the time. If you just start giving ground on all these other rights, then eventually we wind up in a place where nobody has them, right? Like, they have to mean something or they don't mean something. I agree with you on that. I also, to me, it feels completely illogical to not find a solution and get rid of or find what I don't think an amnesty is I don't think amnesty is the reason or is the solution for that many people. It's not like it's 100,000 people or something. It's talking like tens of millions of people. Like that is a whole nother country's worth or several countries worth of people that just came here to the United States in 4 years. Like that's insane. And I think the results of that or the consequences of that have all yet to be seen, to be quite honest. That something must be done. And just saying, well, they have the right to be here in due process, so we're going to do this. Like, I don't think we need to find another solution, whatever that is. If it's an amendment, like I wasn't suggesting and haven't been suggesting, to your point, Chris, like to suspend the Constitution. That's not what I'm saying. I also don't think people are being rounded up by their skin color either. I know people who are in these organizations. I've asked them questions and listened to them explain to me how they've determined that these people are here and that and how they're getting rid of them. Right? Like I think is arguing from an extreme. To say that that's just happening because you look Mexican and so I'm going to go and get you. If that was true, I mean, if that's happened and there's been mistakes been made, then like I said before, it deserves to be rectified because that's a problem. Like, you shouldn't be profiling people. We already have laws against things like that. But something must be done, and it can't be like, I worry about what the future looks like without solving this problem. I don't think amnesty is the solution because I don't think that that solves anything. It doesn't. It really just makes everything worse. All the problems we have already are going to get exponentially worse because we have tens of millions more people here in this country. The state, like you said before, and the strain that puts on it is going to be even more untenable than it already is, and the problems that people have here. Like, something in an expeditious manner must be done. And I 100% agree with you that the way it should be done are within the laws of this country, with all three of the branches working together as co-equal branches to do this. And I don't know, maybe like we've talked about this before, where, like, you know, Obama said, well, if Congress isn't going to act, I'm going to act, right? And maybe it may sound hypocritical to say, like, yeah, obviously I've criticized him for doing those things. And just like, you know, we've talked about Lincoln too, like, I'm going to do this. And I know you've said before, and I agree with you, that you don't think anything Lincoln did was unconstitutional, even though people make that argument, right? That the reason why something like that is happening is because we have a dysfunctional Congress that won't do anything. And I don't think any of our branches are willing to work together. I think that's the bigger problem of finding a solution, is that our government literally is dysfunctional and can't come up with a solution to this problem because they don't care about solving the problem. They care about sticking it to the other side. And that's all they really care about. Not everything that happens that's wrong is because a Democrat exists. Not everything that happens that's wrong is because a Republican exists. And that's they just can't seem to stop doing that thing. And that's also why people like Nick Fuentes are popular now, because the model we have is so stupid that it says to all these people, hey, constitutional republics don't work because you wind up in what we have now. That's what people think, right? And that, whatever it is, the solution, I would much rather it be, like you said, inside the confines of what our government can do, with whatever it looks like, an amendment or something else, to go after and solve this problem. But it is a problem that I don't think that amnesty, or just saying due process in the way it looks, and when I say in the way it looks, and like as slow as the court system is now, right, that is a solution either. Like, something must happen, you know?
Gosh, we're haunted by Lincoln, aren't we? I'll get to that in a second. But by the way, I'm kind of stuck on this idea of, can amendments have any kind of time bound to them?
Yeah, I don't know.
The
I
answer.
really don't.
I don't know, because I mean there are certainly parts of the Constitution that had a time bound nature to them, right? The importation clause. Gosh, I don't know. We are haunted by Lincoln here, and I'm sure I've spoken about the Lyceum Address before, which I think might have been one of
You
the most
did last
prophetic
time.
things ever said. Yeah, but you have just explained the problem. Good people so disgusted by the failure to abide by the rule of law that they are willing to give extraordinary, dare I say, unconstitutional powers into the hands of the person willing to reestablish law and order, because there's no other way. And man, he is quite something. So okay, I've got you're gonna hate this solution so much. Here's a wild solution for you, and it does involve amnesty, so I realize off the bat it's dead in the water. But a general amnesty followed by a nationwide, all hands on deck civic education movement, where every single person who entered this country over the past X number of years, we are going to do a campaign of civic education and political assimilation and English language learning and something like we've never seen in our country's history. Let's make these people Americans.
I don't
Kind
hate
of
that
a
as
thing.
much as you may think I do. And I'll say
Oh,
there's reasons why, and I'll give you, and because I'm going to build on what you said. I think that I don't think there's anything wrong with making like English the national language here, because I think like, even though we don't have a national language, like English, it is like that I think it's totally fine to say something like that. If you come here, you're required to learn the language. I'm not telling you have to forget Spanish or Chinese or whatever, but you must learn English. That I feel like is just completely normal expectation. I agree with you that if you did do something like amnesty, that if you have to go through whatever civics course, however that looks, right? However that falls out. If you don't go, then that is a, you're getting the fuck out of here. Like, if you can't abide by that rule, then you can leave, like. But the other thing I would say too is I feel like all these people that came here illegally owe a debt to the people that are here already, because what you did was come here illegally, and you did put an insane amount of strain on the people that exist here, and you owe some sort of civic service to this country. I don't want you in the military. I don't think that the military is an experiment for something like that. Like, if you want to earn your citizenship by going into the military voluntarily, then you go right ahead. But I wouldn't want to see some sort of like draft for all these people where you get a bunch of people in the military that don't want to be there. That's what I'm saying. If you want to earn your citizenship by going through the military, then you can do that. There are avenues for you to do that. Go talk to a recruiter, right? But some sort of civic responsibility, whatever that looks like, taking your ass out to a bridge and cleaning the crap out from under it, and you are now responsible for 2 years of labor or something like that because you broke the law to come here, and you said you don't respect the people in the country here enough that you put yourself over the top of the principles that are supposed to unite us to come here and exist here, then I think that you do owe a debt to the people that live here already, that you should be responsible for some sort of not just civic education, but civic responsibility, whatever that looks like. Cleaning up trash, finding a way, finding yourself onto a construction crew, finding yourself into working at the animal shelter. I don't care, whatever it is, something of that nature, right? Like, that you should be completely and totally directly responsible for something like that, and your presence here hinges on the performance of that and the education that you should receive on this country. And then at the end of that, you get to take an oath that says that you will not put any other country or culture over the top of the one here, and then enforce the law that says that if you do something like that, you are gone. No ifs, ands, or buts. Because this country is in a time of turmoil. I also will say this too. Like, I think the fact, like, some of the geopolitical pressures on this country too are a contributor to this problem. We could probably have a whole ass conversation about that too. But that something like that, if you're going to amnesty these people and say they should have some sort of civic education, that they have to bear some sort of civic responsibility for coming here the way that they did. And to me, like I said, you owe a debt to the people that have been here already, are here already, and the citizens that are here already. And because if like you said, people that come here and have these basic rights, like you said, these natural human rights, they don't have all the rights of a citizen, to give them amnesty and say you have all the same rights as a citizen, and all you had to do was cross an arbitrary line in the sand, like, that's not fair. You owe a debt to this country because of what you did to come here. And I mean, just whatever, I guess we can have a conversation about that being however you think about it, I guess, but like, that's how I feel. Like, you did something to this country by the number of people that came here, and then the people that let it happen should be held responsible completely and totally. I think what happened is an abomination. Like, the past 4 years, what happened here, like, there is no precedent for that number of people coming here, and there is not anything in history to go back and look at and say, like, this is the most blueprint thing that I can look at and there was a solution. Like, there are solutions or there are historical precedents for other things, like Rome let somebody hold a position of dictator when there was an extreme situation going on. And that there's other examples. I'm not, I know there's nothing in the Constitution about a temporary dictatorship, and that's not necessarily what I'm saying. But I'm saying that it is totally logical to recognize that sometimes extreme situations require an extreme solution, because this, I do think, is an extreme situation. And if you're going to amnesty those people, I think that they pay a debt by whatever it is, 2 years of civil service. If you want to join the military because it's an all volunteer force and you choose to do that, nobody's forcing you to sign your name on a piece of paper and enlist for 4 years, then fine, go do that. Join the military. I think that there should be a heavy vetting process for something like that, and that's a whole another separate conversation. But I wouldn't want to see that debt repaid by forced military service. That's like the only point I'm making with the military thing. So that's how I would build on your idea.
This is an interesting note. Oh, sorry, Chris.
I was just going to jump in and say that I think that there are several other avenues that we could explore too that would make self-deportation enticing as well. For instance, like
Sure.
amend and turn off these exploitative systems that are being used to entice the illegal immigration. You know, it really kind of harkens back to a 1770 style argument of like, well, hey, if New York is having problems in their economy, why should Virginia bear that, right? Because and like this is, but you look at people in Ohio that are being displaced that don't like watching their culture being subverted out from underneath of them through mass migration, and then they're looking at their federal tax dollars, which is going to places like California that is funding SNAP benefits that are being granted to illegal migrants, right? And so they're starting to come up with this same kind of sentiment of like, you know, hey, why is that burden falling on us? Right. It seems very unfair. I mean, I agree with the sentiment. I think it's very unfair. And so if you were to do things like turn off the SNAP benefits, right, turn off the free phones that they were given, turn off like the free housing in sanctuary cities, or freezing federal funds that are going to these sanctuary cities and states, which allows them to be fungible with their other funds and keep this system going, like that would entice people to self-deport. And then like that I'm just giving out other avenues of saying like, hey, there's nothing non-constitutional about doing that. That's another way that the system is being exploited in order to keep this problem in place. That's literally funding it. But that's one of the things I would like to see happen personally, is all I'm getting at.
Yeah. And another benefit to this kind of general amnesty is immigrants tend to be young and have a lifetime of work ahead of them. And wouldn't it be nice if they had legal status and were paying in 100% into all the things that everyone else pays into? And if this young influx of workers could help us with our birth rate and make Social Security viable again, that would be nice. I wouldn't mind that.
I'd say two things have
So,
to happen. But yeah, go ahead. Sorry. Sound like you're done.
oh, no, that's all. I'm saying there's a lot of benefits to something like this. Also helps us not shrink as a country again because of the birth rate. So there's economic benefits, constitutional benefits potentially if you do it right with a revolution in civic education, and potentially birth rate benefits to something like this.
Mm-hmm. Now, all I was going to say is like the civic education thing you're talking about, I think is like a really important piece of that, because the United States isn't just an economic zone. Like, yeah, I agree with you. Like, taking a bunch of people, whatever, if you're gonna, like, reindustrializing the United States, like that's a movement. If you want to take all these people and you offer them, like maybe that's your debt. Like you have to, you're not going to get a fucking high paying 6-figure job. You're 2 years of civic duty or whatever it is blue collar work in a factory. Like that's what you're doing, like you have to do that. I don't know, like however that would look, but it's not just an economic zone. People have to believe in it too and love being here and not just treat it for the free meal ticket that it is and can be. And that means too, like the other half of it is a lot of the subsidies and things that the government pays for, like those are going to have to be reduced to support that many people now coming onto the teat, as it were, right? Like you can't just throw 20 million people on top of it with everything the way it is. Like something has to give on the other half too. Like this problem has now created a way that Americans have to give room as well onto the things that they like SNAP benefits. Well, you know what? There's a finite amount of resources here. If we're amnestying all these people, all this stuff that the government helps you with, it's going to go away. It's going to get cut in half. Some of these programs that existed before are no longer going to exist because we have to now make room for 20 million more people that came into this country over the last 4 years, right? So there's all these things that have to happen. We have to agree on some very extreme things that involve people's ways of life for something like that to happen. I don't know that people are willing to do something like that because of the entitlement that you talked about before. Like there would be so many people that would be up in arms about WIC and all these other things, that are going to come up. Like, I can't afford to live. I can't afford the fact that I went and had 8 children now, and we're all on government subsidy. Our whole life is subsidized by the U.S. government. Like, you're going to have to tell Americans, you're going to get less now until we basically come through this weird accordion thing that we're going through, and out the other end, like, we're going to be okay. Like, here's an entire pathway and mechanism that this is going to happen, and hope people believe in it, because that's a really hard sell. Like that is, it's just, and forgive me, like, I guess I'm trying to, like, really rope this in here, like, emotionally for me, because I think that what happened over the last 4 years is could be looked at as like a death stroke for what this country's survivability is and what it means, because of the amount of how big the state is and how much people rely on it, because people are so entitled, because people don't understand that you don't need the government to provide every freaking solution for you. But now we're so big and bloated that convincing people that they don't need the government to do things for them is essentially asking them to cut their fingers off. Apparently, that's how people behave, right? Like, you're asking so many other people to give up things already that they're unwilling to give up to make room for the people that they're advocating to be here. But the second they realize the cost of that, they're going to be pissed because they now have to give up something. And yeah, sure, we sell it on the fact that, well, yeah, okay, listen, guys, there's all these military age males or working age males that are here in this country that are going to go into all these different, the workplace, and they're going to contribute to taxes and all these other things. Like, because even if they're paying 100, like, they're all paying taxes still, right, into all these things the same way you are, like, the resources are going to have to expand to make room for that still, and that's not going to happen overnight. Like, there is going to be a very, very rough period of time you're going to have to sell people on. And I just don't, I'm talking about, like, the will of the people, because that's very important, but I'm also, like, trying to talk about, like, the feasibility of something like that. Like, I don't know how that could happen, I guess. Like, this, you have to convince people that what you're about to go through by doing something like that is going to be worth it at the end of the day. And that means you get less and your children get less for a considerable period of time. I promise everything is going to be fine, though, guys, when we come out the other end. Oh, by the way, there's all this stuff going on around the world where we're being constantly challenged. Nobody can agree on what the West is. Nobody can agree on that, what liberalism should actually mean in Europe and all these other places that are traditional allies of the United States. If we give up ground, all these other places around the world, then a lot of these things that you enjoy because of the logistical supply chains and the security the U.S. military provides is now going to come into question. So it may be even harder because we have to spend so much time focusing on solving this major problem domestically, that because of the world we've created over the last 80 years to live in, we have not been good stewards of that over the past 80 years. We certainly weren't good stewards over the last 4 years. So you now have to live like this, and it's going to be okay. But just trust us, guys. Like, this is going to suck, but it's going to be fine. Like, that is like the biggest ask since, I don't know. Like, that's just such a hard thought to conceive. And the reason why, and I apologize, I'm not, like, emotional at you, but, like, it sucks to see, because I've watched this change so fast in my lifetime. You have too. I don't know. I'm not going to ask you how old you are. You're a lady, right? Like, I'm 38 years old, right? I've watched this change. I watched what happened to the U.S. military as a kid, as somebody who had a parent who was in the military, as somebody who had friends whose parents died because of what happened over the last 20 years, as somebody who served, right? This makes me very emotional, because I feel like I'm watching something I love die because people don't care enough. And I don't want to get rid of the Constitution. I want people to believe in it. I wish there was a solution. I wish they would have foreseen the fact that one day somebody was going to step into office and let 20 million people come into this country in 4 years. And just, what are we going to do about this, guys? What clause are we putting in the Constitution to make sure that this problem can get solved? Like, we have to, we can have all these wonderful ideas and principles and enact those things, but if we don't also look at something logically and say, like, there just has to be a solution for this, and maybe amnesty is it with all these caveats of civil service and civil education? But then how else are we going to say, like, you've just revived the American spirit and will to go through something hard and come out the other end? You know, it just, that is, I don't know. I don't see that happening, which is why I feel like, and if it does happen, then fine. Like I'm wrong. I was wrong that something like that happened, and I'll be glad to be wrong, because it meant that this country can be great still. Like it'll exist if it shrinks. Like we'll still be the United States here on this continent. But whatever it meant over the last 80 years, the greatness that America had and the Americana footprint on the face of this earth is going to be reduced to the point where whatever it looks like for my kids may be completely different than what I saw in my lifetime. And it changed so fast, and it's like the dial got turned to 11 on the BS, and it just is. I feel like I've watched it get pissed away in the very short period of time in my life, and people are so apathetic to everything that they think that like they can just that everything is just going to exist anyway, guys. Like it's fine, we can let this happen, you know, even though this place sucks, but come on in. But no, I don't want to have to give up any benefits I get just to let you in, even though that really is the cost at the end of the day. Like this just, I've talked in circles, you know what I mean? Like I just, that's, it drives it. I'm just very passionate about the fact that I think that this, if you study the United States in 150 years and it doesn't exist the way it does today, like that will be one of the things that they look at and say, yeah, the American empire collapsed because of this person and what they did, and Americans got apathetic because they got too comfortable. Like that's what it'll be.
Stupid. The thing I keep hearing from your mouth is that I appreciate is this deep love for your country, and an anger that and a defensiveness that other people have not loved it as well, and
sure.
And that feels very valid. I'm generally critical of the anti-immigrant right, but there is one thing that I think is fair, and that is when you see immigrants protesting ICE, which, you know, protest ICE all you want, who are flying not American flags, but the Mexican flag,
mm-hmm.
or some other country's flag.
Or Spain, yeah, don't matter.
Right. It's a real punch in the face.
Mm-hmm.
Because what you're asking them to do is to love the country that they have entered, often contrary to the law, as well as you love your country and feel defensive of that country's future. And I think that's part of what you want to see. You want to see that they're going to love and take care of your country the way that you love and are trying to take care of your country. And I think it's reasonable to want that. Yeah. But I think this was an interesting evolution for a conversation to get to a point where we could be speaking about an amnesty in some kind of respect, and agree that maybe it's with parameters a kind of
I just want to go on record
solution.
that I didn't agree to that. I don't like your amnesty
yeah, I don't
whatsoever.
Like amnesty either.
I want to be on.
I
want to go on record saying it, but I also it was interesting hearing your argument for it, though.
Yeah, no, that's fine. But that's funny. I will go on record as saying I do not support the mass deportation without due process. Now we're all on record for everything. You know what? I like you too. I think you are you have a wonderful American spirit about you, and there's nothing malicious and cruel in your political thought, and I appreciate that, because you see so much of it on the far left, and there's so much to say about the far left, and you see so much of it on the Nick Fuentes and Candace Owens right, and I just don't see it here, and I really appreciate that.
I don't care if you immigrated here from Kenya. I don't care if you immigrated here from Djibouti. I don't care if you immigrated here from Russia or Japan or whatever. Just be an American. That's all I'm asking. I'm not looking at you as somebody who's just a Muslim or just black or just Russian or whatever. Like I've served with people who were here from other countries. One of the best friends I had in the military is a black female. Like it's just the way it is. That's how the military is. You know, it's a microcosm of America. And for the most part, it's the best qualities of America. Obviously, there are shitheads in the military, right? Like, but I don't care about what you look like. If you want to come here and you want to follow Sharia law, that's not the way. That's not it, bro. Go somewhere where that already exists. If you want to come here and be a Djiboutian before you're an American, that's not it, bro. Go back to Djibouti where you were already a Djiboutian. You don't need to be here. Just because it sucks over there, solve your problems where you live. Don't come here and try to change it to what you were living with, over there. Like, that's not the way this works. I don't care about any of that. Like, that's the difference between, like you said, some of these other people who sort of collectivize everybody based on their immutable characteristics. Like, religion is a choice. That's not an immutable characteristic, right? And I mean, forgive me for having a sore spot, I guess, in that little microcosm of the world, I suppose. But like, there are plenty of Muslims who live here who just want to live here and they want to practice their faith the same way everybody else who peacefully practices their faith here. If you want to come here and be a Muslim or a Jew or Buddhist or Baha'i or Christian, then you can come here and do all those things. Just don't pretend like you can come here and turn this into a theocracy or have a part of this country that is just a theocracy in that little region where you want to live. Like, that's not going to happen. Like, that's the only thing that's my point. I don't care what you look like. You want to practice a different religion with me? Fucking knock yourself out. But you better be an American first. That's what I care about. You love this place. You understand its history. You learned about it, right? I don't know everything. That's for certain. Nobody knows everything, right? You certainly know a lot more than Chris and I do, which is why I like having these sorts of conversations with you, because you are so educated and I appreciate your opinions on them, but just love this place and call yourself an American because you love, this country. It's that G.K. Chesterton quote about Rome, right? Men did not love Rome because she was great. She was great because men had loved her. And I love America. And I want you to love America. I don't want you to turn it into some bastardization of whatever you think it is, or because you don't agree with everybody that lives here and you want to feel more comfortable here or whatever it is. Like, you want to morph this into something it isn't. Like, that's not the point. We have to be able to say we have a culture here. We have ideas here that we think are better because that's why we live here. I'm not saying you suck as a person. I'm saying that that's just what we think here, buddy. Like, get with the program or go find another program. There's nothing wrong with saying that, right? Like, no. When I lived in Germany, if I was calling every German I met a Nazi because of what happened in the 1930s and 40s, like, they would hate me. You know what I mean? But that's what happens to Americans here by other Americans, and then people who come here and want to call people something because of something terrible that happened in American history or whatever. It's like, for every wrong in American history, I can like point at the attempt to correct it or the correction. We are no different than any other country that has problems and tries to solve them because we care. Like I said at the top of this conversation, this is not finished. It is a work in progress. And the ideals we have are something, if we're not attaining to them, we're always supposed to be working toward them. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know.
The reason I have such a hard time getting behind any plan that has to do with the amnesty route is kind of exemplified by the victory speech that Zoran Mamdani gave in New York City after this last election, where he stood up and he spoke about the Trinidadian taxi drivers and the Colombian bodega shop runners and the Sri Lankan aunties or whatever. He went down this entire list, and never once in there did he ever say American. Like, he never even used the word American, and he was speaking to his constituents. Right. And like these are the people that I reached out to vote for me as a socialist to implement these socialist policies in New York City. And they came out for him and they voted for him. And in that speech, I find my ideological opponent on this issue. And I see the direction that he's trying to go with the United States. And it's to turn it not into the United States, which is why I can't go along with that in any way, shape, or form. And I think that, with all due respect, your amnesty plan, I think you're looking at it through kind of like educator kind of rose-colored glasses that you think that we can implement like an education system that would cause these people to want to assimilate. But I just don't see that being the case when they're already showing that they're fundamentally trying to change the way that civics works in the United States by fracturing and subverting the very culture that made a place like New York City the birthplace of immigration, or at least kind of the ideal American spot of immigration with Lady Liberty. They're trying to fundamentally change it into something that's non-American. And so that's what I would push back on your amnesty plan with, and say, like, I don't see a path forward of convincing people that already want to change the United States because they're showing it, convincing them of adopting American ideals and American culture and then becoming American. And so that's why I think, like, realistically, the only path forward is, like, we need to remove people that, for, you know, if you're here illegally, if you're not going through the legal immigration process, and you're fundamentally trying to change my country out from under me, you need to leave. Like, this is not, if you want to come here and you want to turn this country into the country you came from, then you need to go back to the country you came from and deal with the consequences of your actions there, because that's what made that country like that. That's not what made America like the way that it is today. But respectfully, that's the way that I wanted to push back on your amnesty plan, because I just don't see it.
I will say this.
No,
go ahead. I'll say it after.
Oh, I was just going to say that it's a fair criticism that I'm probably way too optimistic and biased towards education. And part of that just does come from my profession. When I walk into a classroom, I assume that I can make every student fall in love with America.
For sure.
And so that's
were that to be true, I wish it were.
Yeah.
well, so maybe that's probably a fair bias. And also, I'm so grateful I don't live in freaking New York City. I have my husband has a lot of family in New York City, and I'm pretty sure they all voted for Mom Donnie. And good luck.
Yeah, all I was going to say
democracy
is,
sucks.
Democracy sucks. Yeah, yeah. No, that I've grown up around other cultures my whole life, because I lived in Japan as a kid, I lived in Germany as a kid, I lived in England as a kid. I traveled all over the world from those places to other parts in Asia and Europe. I've been to Africa, all over the world when I was in the military, right? I've been to, like, the only two continents I haven't been to are South America and Antarctica. You know, like, that's it. I've been everywhere else. And I like other cultures. People who, like, if you know me, and there are plenty of people who do, like, I know a lot about a lot of other cultures. I have friends that are from other countries. I have a good friend who is a German. I have a good friend who is Portuguese, right? I think that the things that we're talking about with other people's cultures are a very unique thing about the United States that I like. Like, I don't have a problem with you being from Sri Lanka. If you want to be, you know, I can recognize you as somebody who is from another country, and say you have an awesome culture. I think that's really cool that you guys do this, right? I have a bunch of people in my neighborhood that celebrate Diwali. Their houses look beautiful when they do that. I think it's cool. I think it makes my neighborhood look neat, you know? Like, most of them are incredibly nice, right? There's a guy that gives my son walnuts all the time. He barely speaks English, you know? That, I think that's great. But I don't need to not recognize that you're from another country, you know, to expect you to be an American, I guess, you know. So like his little tactic, I guess, by addressing everybody as like all these other things, like, that's what his base wants to hear. But I think that there are a lot of people that really think that way. You know, there's a whole movement from the black population in this country that's pushing for segregation again. Like, didn't we already have this conversation and we decided that, like, that's not a good idea? You know, like, we had this conversation, but people are pushing for it. And I think it has a lot to do with a failure in education, to your point. I do think that civic education, if it was back in schools, would reach a lot more people than it didn't reach. You know, I think there's a lot of stupidity, and I think there's way more manufactured noise that confuses people about what this is supposed to be. And there's been a campaign for the past feels like 20 years to convince you that the founding fathers were racist pieces of shit, and if you are a white guy you're inherently bad, or if you love America and the American flag you're inherently bad, all these things, and people believe that. I think that there was an info ops campaign that either on purpose, or the tertiary effect of it was you created a generation of Americans who hate America, and that's a problem. That's why people almost prefer the partisan politics, because it's fun. It feels good to have an enemy, I guess. No, people do though. Like, I think some people enjoy that, but anyway.
Well, I've had a great time chatting with you.
Sorry, I
I
know
need to
it's
get to bed before
yeah,
my baby decides that it's time
yeah.
for me to be awake again.
It's fine.
But no. I stayed because I enjoy chatting with you both a lot, and I always have a fun time coming on here. So I appreciate you letting me come.
Well, I appreciate you coming on here and talking with the peasant class, I guess, as it were. Not the just teasing you. But no, thank you again, for coming on, and it's good to hear, for people to hear what you have to say, because you just do, more about our founding documents than really anybody I know personally, and that's really important to hear. I didn't mean, I guess, to wander into the realm of wiping my nose with the Constitution and saying it doesn't matter, because that's not what I was ever trying to say. And my emotion for this problem comes out because I do, like you said, like, yeah, there is an anger in me for people who don't care, because I've seen, like, I've grown up in the military my whole life. Like, I've watched people give their life for this country. I have friends that have. I know people who had to live through that. Like, it's a very visceral thing to me. And why I say people owe a debt to other Americans. Like, they matter more to me than these other people. And I don't think there's anything wrong in saying that. And it's good to be checked, and for you to present the fact that my maybe emotional response to that doesn't align with the thing that I so ardently say I believe in, right? And so it's a good thing to have somebody who can come and say, hey, big guy, maybe we tone it down a skosh, and here's what this actually says. And I think that's a good thing, and why I invite somebody like you on, because I think that everybody should be checked every once in a while on their more visceral responses to things, So I appreciate you coming on and talking to us, and I hope that you're able to get some sleep, and that your baby doesn't keep you up the rest of the night. So
Thank you.
yeah.
All right. Bye, Chris and
Bye.
Brandon. Have a great
Goodbye.
night.
Bye. Thank you so much.